Hey everyone, welcome to episode 3 of the ATDev podcast. We are joined today by our COO, Dave Wilkinson. Thanks for being here, Dave.
Thanks, Owen. Great to be here.
Awesome. So, yeah, for our listeners, I'd love just if you could give a brief overview of your professional experience and to ATDev.
Yeah, sounds great. Thanks, Todd, as well for hosting me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So let's see, I started out, I've been in engineering for over 30 years at this point. Graduated from Johns Hopkins University, degree at BS in mechanical engineering, and started working in optical equipment. I worked on a pretty interesting, this is going way back, but on a medical printer for CAT scans, basically. So the idea would be it would create a holographic image of CAT scan data. So the idea is when you get a CAT scan or MRI, you're getting sliced data, images of your brain or whatever it is that is being scanned. And this is prior to really powerful computers being able to stitch all that together, create 3D models. And this is a system that would take all that data and create a holographic image on a special piece of film. So I worked, it was the size of multiple refrigerators, and it had something like 30 to 40 lenses and mirrors in it. And I worked on the optical stability and adjustment of the system. So some of the mirrors and lenses were upwards of 10 to 15 pounds. And then some as small as the size of a dime or something. And then a very large laser driving all of it. So really just fascinating work on how to build stable yet adjustable optical systems. So that was the first 5 years or so of my career. I did a few other projects there, and then I'd always been passionate about helicopters, and I just, from a mechanical engineering standpoint, they're incredible complexity, and they really have no right to be flying. There's just it just seems to break all sorts of physics, but somehow they do it. And so I was fortunate to join BF Goodrich. And it started as a startup actually that got bought by BF Goodrich. So I was joining this small offsite team that was developing, it was called a HUMS system, Health and Usage Monitoring System, that consisted of about 30 different sensors placed all over the airframe and the engines of the helicopter. And these were naval helicopters, Seahawk and the Sea Stallion. That's a massive helicopter, seven bladed rotor, and can lift, I forget, but can lift huge amounts of cargo. But these essentially accelerometers all over the airframe and the engines to detect if any system or subsystem or bearing may be on its way to failing, and could also monitor how the helicopter is being used. Is it in, I forget the terms, but banking hard, recording banking turns, all that, or it's hovering in place. So to get a sense of the stresses on the airframe during a typical flight. Really fascinating work. Got to crawl around on top of helicopters, look at signal processing data and all that, design some sensor mounts, that type of thing. So really enjoyed that. But during that time, I started really getting interested in robotics, and I was struggling to actually land a job in that field. And I was really passionate about doing that. So I decided to go back to school. This is after about 8 or 9 years of working. I decided to go back to school, get a master's degree, and I went to Carnegie Mellon. Like I said, that was almost 20 years ago, and I've been in that industry ever since, in robotics, and really thankful that I got to that school and had the experience I did. That was definitely a turning point for me.
Did you like living in Pittsburgh?
I did. I loved Pittsburgh. Yeah, my fiance and I moved out there. We're now married, of course, but we loved Pittsburgh, met great people, and enjoyed the city itself. And we decided to move back to Boston, but we did once I was done with my degree, a 2-year program. But we seriously considered staying in Pittsburgh for some time, and decided against it for various reasons, including family on the East Coast. But yeah. Love the city. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard great things. I've not been yet. I'm hoping to very soon here.
Yes. Yeah, and then happy to go into more of the robotics stuff. Is that of interest? Cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think I'm always curious about how people end up working in assistive technology because while it's a pretty relatively niche space, it's also very right, interdisciplinary, and it draws
Right.
on a lot of different engineering disciplines. So yeah, I would love to hear what was your journey and your thought process on moving into healthcare robotics.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. So I certainly didn't start there when I entered the field of robotics. I had a few projects at school. One was working on some understanding of different suspension systems for unmanned ground vehicles. That was the first year. That was funded by a DARPA program that my advisor was running. And then I ended up actually switching advisors just because my interests were more aligned with a different professor. Her name is Professor Yoki Matsuoka, and she was developing a few different things, but one was very focused on manipulation, like understanding how the human hand works, and then trying to mimic that with engineering subsystems, right? Motors,
Right.
cables, mechanical joints, that type of thing. So I spent my second year, in addition to classes, working on a project developing the tendon structure that could mimic the complex web of tendons that help you flex and extend your fingers. So that merging of how the human body works with robotics has definitely been a theme over the past 20 years of mine. And as I work on various, in this case, medical device systems where they're either assisting people or helping to rehab people, or in the case of surgical robots, entering soft tissue and manipulating that tissue. So that was definitely a turning point for me, working with that professor, understanding biomechanics, the complexity of the human body, and driven to use the tools we had to mimic that. And we're still not there either, right? It can be quite frustrating to know what your goal is. If your goal is to develop the perfect mechanical human hand, and it's sitting, your hand is right in front of you, and yet you can't do it. And I've been working the problem for multiple decades in different ways.
Yeah, I worked on a similar project at Northeastern for just a semester, but just the amount of leverage that the tendons can get on the finger with those small tendon hoods and the passageways is incredible. The diameter of these tendons and the fact that they don't pop, even if you're holding your entire weight, it's incredible. And you're right, the fact that we've known about these for decades and they've existed for centuries, millennia.
Since our lifetime, by definition.
Yeah, exactly. And we still are unable to replicate it is pretty incredible.
Yeah, and even the self-healing properties, and then not just the tendons, but just the energy density. You can eat a hamburger and then do all sorts of things based on that energy, where we have to charge our robots with batteries and plug them in and all that. So it's just amazing.
When we can feed the first humanoid robot a hamburger, then it's able to pick you up. We've done it.
Yeah, our share price will go way up then.
That's right. So then, soon after graduating, I had a few different jobs. One was working actually at Northeastern. I worked with a professor. I did consulting, and I was working with a professor developing eight-legged walking systems for potential planet exploration. I also worked at a company called Bluefin Robotics doing underwater systems. So it was about a year of my time doing consulting work, but we were married at that point. We had a son. We were growing the family and needed stability. So I decided to look for a full-time job, and I joined Barrett Technology and eventually became director of engineering there, and then VP, and then CTO eventually. But I spent a good majority of my career in robotics, almost 16, 17 years there, working on a few different robotic systems, and that sort of transition. So Yoki Matsuoka, my professor at Carnegie Mellon, started at Barrett as an intern. And so she has worked on the Barrett hand, which is a three-fingered manipulator, dexterous hand. And so I worked on that as well once I joined, and struggled with that problem of mimicking the human hand. But really another turning point for me was when we were challenged by the board to find a vertical market rather than creating all these various advanced robots for researchers, find a vertical market. And so we chose rehabilitation, specifically arm and hand rehabilitation post-stroke. And over a 5-6 year period, we basically turned the company into a medical device company with a quality system, developed from scratch with help from consultants, and then developed this 3 degree of freedom robot that essentially helps someone regain relearn how to move their arm and their hand. The robot supports the weight of their arm, and they're effectively essentially playing video games while the arm is either helping them achieve their goals or keeping them from their goals so that they have to work harder, maintain their scores, all that. And so hospitals now buy these, clinics buy them, and then stroke patients are able to use them. So very excited about that. It was definitely a turning point in my career.
I mean,
yeah, that's great.
Timing wise, you like you said, rode from pure robotics, deep R&D, and then as you were growing through your career, transition into a medical device company and launch a product. And so would you consider that to be your first startup growth journey? All right, I guess you had the consulting gig as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that was so different, right? The consulting gig was just a different feel to it, but selling myself basically as a consultant, and I love that too. But yeah, I think Barrett's an interesting company. It's been around for almost 30 years. Relatively small, about 20 people. When I joined, it was maybe 7 people. And yeah, it was disparate projects. We wrote a lot of proposals to the government, won a bunch of SBIRs to develop various robotic systems and subsystems. But that pivot happened across the company and with that product. It was in parallel, we're developing the infrastructure while developing the product itself. Not unlike what we're doing here at ATDev. Yeah. Let's see. And then, just to continue, I having achieved that, I felt it was time to move on to something else. Boston area, there was a relatively new startup called Vicarious Surgical, a soft tissue, multi-armed invasive robotic surgical device. Teleoperated, a very complex system. I joined as VP of Systems Engineering and spent a couple of years there. Really interesting. Met a lot of very interesting people. Helped grow the engineering team, my engineering team, from about 6 or 7 to 50 engineers.
Wow.
Across all disciplines.
Wow. And in only a very short amount of time, right?
Yes. Yeah. We went, the company went public, raised a lot of money, and then we were able to move quite quickly and hire a significant number of people. So they're still going strong. They have not yet launched, but I had always been interested in exoskeletons, assistive devices. I'd worked on rehab robots. I now worked on surgical devices. And I really wanted to try my hand at assistive devices and wearables, basically. So I had the fortune to meet you, and then Owen meet you as well, and really be excited by what you guys are trying to do. And
I think it'd be great to maybe share the story of how we all got met through windsurfing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it's a funny story, and I have three boys, and this was COVID, I guess 2021. So we were a little late 2020, early 2021. We were a little stir crazy, looking for new hobbies. My boys, the 3 boys, they had been doing sailing in the summer, and we had talked about windsurfing sometime. So long story short, we got on eBay, found a few windsurfers, bought them, and then we were able to spend time at the beach, not holed up in our house during COVID, and just learn to windsurf, basically. I'd done a little bit when I was younger, so I was happy to pass it on to my boys. But one particular day we were out there. It was very windy, and my boys were fairly young at the time, quite windy, and there was a gentleman there doing windsurfing, and he was quite good at it, amazing at it. And he saw we were struggling, so he came in and just started working with my boys, especially the older one, and teaching them a better rigging style with a sail, teaching them how to launch in high winds and all that. And he spent a good 30 to 40 minutes with them, just helping them out. And so we chatted afterwards. Turns out he had started his own, he is a robotics engineer, was a co-founder of a exoskeleton company out in the West Coast. And we basically traded information, decided to keep in touch. I prompted my oldest son, to make sure to get that information so he could thank him in the future for the time he spent. So then, fast forward maybe a year. I guess this is 2020. So fast forward a year, I decided to move on, find something new. And I reached out to this gentleman. His name's Michael McKinley. And long story short, I said, hey, I'm looking for a job, interested in exoskeletons for sure. Let me know. And then Todd, I think I'll pass it over to you.
And we at that time were looking, we had raised a little bit of capital and we're looking to grow the team and bring on somebody who had some experience, who had helped launch products before, had built quality systems, had really done the transition that you helped facilitate at Barrett. And I'd reach out to Michael as somebody who I'd worked with when I worked for him as a capstone student and then a summer intern at Sudex, his exoskeleton company, and said, "Hey, do you know anybody who might fill this role?" And the timing just worked out where I think about a month after I'd reached out to Michael, you reached out to him and he forwarded me your resume. And the rest is history. Yeah.
Yeah, very serendipitous.
Yeah, and it was a great lesson about networking in general. And I was pleased, obviously, that it all happened the way it did, but also that my young boys could see the effects of real networking when you're not even networking. We were just out there windsurfing. You never know who you're going to meet that might help you down the line. So
Yeah.
nice life lesson for all.
Yeah, yeah. I think the moral of the story is to go windsurfing more.
Yeah, that's right.
Take away.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome.
Awesome, Dave. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast, and
Yeah.
obviously thank you for everything that you've done at ATDev and continue to do, and it's always a pleasure.
Thank you so much, guys. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, good chatting, Dave. I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Sounds good. Bye.
All right, see you, everybody.
Bye-bye.